Hello, my name is Roy Kim. I'm a pastor here in Melbourne, Australia. Today, I want to talk to you about endurance and encouragement. In Romans chapter 15, verses 1 to 4, the Bible says, "We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Each of us should please our neighbors for their good to build them up, for even Christ did not please himself. But as it is written, the insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through the endurance taught in scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope." My tendency is to avoid those who make my life difficult. Well, Paul instructs his readers to lean into the endurance and encouragement of Christ, and then to pass on that endurance and encouragement to those who are in need of it. Laura Hillenbrand wrote Unbroken, a biography of Louis Zamperini, a young man who endured incredible hardship and cultivated hope during and after World War II. Zamperini was born on January 26, 1917, in Olean, New York. He was raised in a strict, devout Catholic household. But regardless, he took up smoking and drinking at a very young age and struggled with bullies, often getting into fights. Zamperini's brother Pete was highly supportive of him and encouraged him to start his running career. In secondary education, Zamperini took his training seriously and began winning races in grade 9. His last 3 years of secondary, he was undefeated, and by his final year of high school, Zamperini won the CIF California State Championship by running a mile in 4 minutes and 27 seconds. This gave Zamperini a scholarship to the University of Southern California. In 1936, Zamperini decided to try out for the Olympics. The competition was fierce in the 1500 meter, so he decided to run the 5000 meter instead. The qualifier took place on one of the hottest days of the year, with several athletes collapsing during their races. It was reported that 40 people died from the heat that week in Manhattan alone. With a sprint finish at the end, Zamperini finished in a dead heat tie against American record holder Don Lash and qualified for the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin, Germany. Having qualified at 19 years and 178 days, he was the youngest American 5,000 meter qualifier. In Berlin, Zamperini made it to the finals but finished 8th. For the next 4 years, Zamperini trained so he could make it back to the Olympics, but by 1940, Zamperini enlisted in the Air Force to help fight in the war. Zamperini served in the Pacific on a B-24 Liberator as a bombardier. In April 1943, Zamperini's crew participated in a bombing mission against the Japanese-held island of Nauru. Following the successful raid, Zamperini's plane was attacked by 3 Japanese fighters. Out of the 11 men aboard the B-24, 5 were injured and 1 died. Zamperini is credited with administering first aid to the 5 wounded crewmen. The bomber landed with 594 bullet and shell fragments in the fuselage and tail structure, not to mention a flat tire. With the plane no longer airworthy, the remaining healthy crew members of Zamperini's plane were transferred to Hawaii. The men were reassigned to look for missing aircraft and crew throughout the Pacific. The crew were given the Green Hornet, a B-24 that was notorious for being a lemon. On the 27th of May, 1943, mechanical difficulties caused the Hornet to crash 1,370 kilometers south of Oahu. Of the 11 crew members aboard the Hornet, only 3 survived the crash: Zamperini, pilot Russell Allen Phillips, and Francis McNamara. The 3 men shared 2 rafts with little food and no water. They survived on rainwater, small fish eaten raw, and 2 albatross that landed on their raft. The men used their oars to fend off sharks and were strafed several times by Japanese fighters. After 33 days at sea, Francis McNamara died. And on their 47th day adrift, Zamperini and Phillips reached the Marshall Islands and were taken prisoner by the Japanese Navy. While adrift at sea, Zamperini made a deal with God. He said, "God, if I survive, I will give you my life." For 2.25 years, Zamperini was held in captivity, severely beaten and mistreated until the end of the war in August 1945. During that time, Zamperini was transferred to 4 different prisoner of war camps. While at the Omori prison camp, Zamperini was tormented by a guard, Mutsuhiro Wanatabe. Wanatabe would end up on General Douglas MacArthur's list of the 40 most wanted war criminals in Japan at number 23. Wanatabe allegedly ordered one man who reported to him to be punched in the face every night for 3 weeks. It was also reported that Wanatabe practiced judo on an appendectomy patient. Never being registered as a prisoner of war, Zamperini had at first been declared missing in action, and then a year and a day after the date of his disappearance, his status was changed to killed in action. When Zamperini eventually returned home, he received a hero's welcome. Zamperini married Cynthia Applewhite in 1946, but adjusting to civilian life was not easy. Zamperini struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, and on one occasion he woke up realizing that he was strangling his pregnant wife. The trauma of the war had become so severe, Zamperini became dependent on alcohol, and this led Applewhite to explore the possibility of divorce. After attending one of Billy Graham's Los Angeles Crusades, Applewhite became a born-again Christian. And in 1949, at the encouragement of Applewhite and her Christian friends, Zamperini reluctantly agreed to attend a crusade. Graham's preaching reminded Zamperini of his prayers during his time on the life raft and imprisonment, and Zamperini committed his life to Christ. Following this, he forgave his captors and his nightmares ceased. Later, Graham helped Zamperini launch a new career as a Christian evangelist. One of his recurring themes was forgiveness. Zamperini would visit many of the guards from his prisoner of war days and let them know that he had forgiven them. Zamperini reports that several of his captors became Christian as a result of their conversations. 4 days before his 81st birthday in January 1998, Zamperini ran a leg of the Olympic torch relay for the Winter Olympics in Nagano, Japan, not far from the prisoner of war camp where he had been held. While there, he attempted to meet with his chief and most brutal tormentor during the war. Wanatabe had evaded prosecution as a war criminal and became an insurance salesman. Even though Zamperini had extended an offer of reconciliation, Wanatabe refused to see him. Louis Zamperini lived to the age of 97 and passed away in his home in 2014. Zamperini's story serves as a reminder of how we can cultivate hope as we lean into God for endurance and encouragement. May God bless you as you lean into God in your moments of difficulty.